Hello, English 411. Here's a little video guide a la PowerPoint to The Country Wife. This is a play that builds on some of the conversations we've been having about the Restoration, but it takes them in a very satiric direction. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background on the Restoration Theatre. This is the first era of British theatre that has women playing women's roles. It also is the beginning of female playwrights who have a career on the stage. So women's bodies and women's perspectives are newly available. Now, in the case of Wycherley's The Country Wife, of course, we have a play written by a man, but featuring the female body and playing with the presence of the actress on the stage. So in the case of the Restoration actress, we have a kind of novelty, and there is still illusion going on. There is still performativity going on, but there's a new play with reality. What this actress replaced, of course, was the tradition of the boy actor, which was technically still alive at the Restoration, and Ned Kinniston was one of the last of the boy actors. This clip from Stage Beauty tells you just a little bit about what his life and appearance might have been like. If you'd like to see more of that clip, I'll make it available for you. Now, The Country Wife is a satire, and we have our own social satires. Sex and the City, while a little bit dated, is one of them. The point of that show is not that these women actually behave this way or that all women actually behave this way, but it's a bit of a satire on anxieties and modern sexual mores, which are confusing. In this category, we might also put a show like The Office, or Entourage, and lesser-known films like Your Friends and Neighbors. So there's a distance in that satirist point of view. The Way of the World, which is a 1700 social satire, is another example of this kind of extended meditation on what people are like in social situations, and particularly what elite people are like. If we want to think about more recent films, 20th century films, 21st century films, The Graduate, going back a few years, or more recently American Beauty, is one. These are examples that remind us that satire is political. Now, in The Country Wife, we have a bit of a play going on in the title. Marjorie Pinchwife, is from the country, and Pinchwife has gone to the country to find a purer woman. But behind that set of assumptions are assumptions about what the city and the country are like. Raymond Williams, the Marxist critic, talked about the distinction in terms of pastoral and counterpastoral, that the country is the place of the pastoral, of innocence, and the counterpastoral, or the city story, the urban story, brushes up against that. Now, some other satires that we will get to include Rochester's Fair Chloris, which, if you were offended by The Country Wife, fasten your seatbelts. That will definitely offend you. This image is from a 2007 production of The Country Wife at the Royal Haymarket. I'm actually not fond of this as a poster because it sort of just plays a little too literally on the title. But it was an attempt to revive this play for modern audiences. Now, moving along, we talked a little bit about how the Restoration saw the end of the Puritan regime, and that there was a bit of a kind of vengeance taking against Puritan culture. Just a few years before The Country Wife, a play called The Roundheads had been staged primarily to make fun of the Puritans. And one of the favorite ways to make fun of the Puritans was to talk about their ideas about sexuality. Puritans tend to be cast in a humorless position in these plays, and I just wanted to sort of briefly make the point that Puritans are being used politically here, and that it is certainly possible to have a sense of humor and also a sense of a more conservative sexual politics. So I wanted to throw that in a play that can seem like it's just valorizing really bad behavior. Now, I want to talk briefly about some character types that you see in Restoration comedy, and the first is the fop. The fop is generally a male figure in the play who pays too much attention to fashion, who wants to be accepted by other men, and he is a sign of class anxieties in a generation that is shifting from a notion of class as birth to a notion of class as economic status. Now, one of the things that happens in modern productions is that the fop is often played as a kind of queer or queen figure. This production, still from Restoration comedy, shows a little bit of that, though this show is a very witty and meta take on that problem. So the fop wants to be the object of attention. He's often too interested in women, but mainly he is a man who tries too hard and he does masculinity wrong. Here are a couple of other examples of great fops in history. Alex Jennings, a contemporary actor, to the right, and on the bottom, Colley Cibber, who was probably the greatest fop actor of the Restoration. Now, next to the fop, we have the rake. That's Horner. Horner is an expression of libertine masculinity. We will talk more about what that means when we get to Rochester. But Rochester, or John Wilmot, is the prototypical rake in real life. And many Restoration comedies tried to present him as a kind of celebrity figure. The Man of Mode, in fact, was written about him. So this is a celebration of the return of Charles II and the end of Puritan rule. It's a very kind of punk, defiant posture. And we see a peak of this in the Restoration, and particularly in the 1670s. And after that, a desire to kind of reform or back away from the extremes of the rake. The rake is interested in his triumph over other men. In the handout that I've sent around, we'll get into that just a little bit more. He seems, in fact, even more interested in triumphing over other men than he is in actually having women. And this is not an equal opportunity kind of position. In the Rover, we find that women can't necessarily rebel in the same ways. Later 18th century plays try to soften this figure while still enjoying the pleasure of a very direct and kind of sexual masculinity. Now, in our own times, we might think a little bit about what we call metrosexuals, men who seem comfortable playing with the boundaries of gender. And this gives us, I think, a perspective on Horner and his masculinity, which is about mastering gender anxiety. Horner is using the idea that he is a eunuch or that he's sexually incapable in order to gain sexual access to women. That makes him a kind of powerless figure in the eyes of some men, but in fact, because he's willing to play with that, he gets more power. Note also that the Restoration uses the term effeminate to talk about men who spend too much time with women. And finally, as Eve Sedgwick argues, homosociality means men promoting the interests of men. It's about alliances between men, and that's distinct from homosexuality, though we will talk a little bit about the possible blur between those lines. Now, for later on, I encourage you to take a look at this YouTube trailer. You can clip the link out of there. You get just a little bit of the soundtrack. Again, these are contemporary productions trying to bring these plays back to life for modern audiences. And lastly, this clip from The Libertine, which I will also send around and we will look at in class. This is a film that I do recommend, but it is very, very racy, and it features Johnny Depp as Lord Rochester. So here's just a little preview and a little window on the Restoration Playhouse. All right, I hope that helps you get ready for discussion on Tuesday when we will talk about The Country Wife. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you then.